Hello friends, and welcome to Jocelyn's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. This is part 2 of a video that I started last month about the whole experience of being investigated by HMRC. Now, in last month's video I talked you through the experience of what it was like. Generally speaking, it was not good. So if you don't want to watch the video from last month, that's all you really need to know. It was pretty stupid, but in the end, they didn't find anything wrong with my accounts. So with that in mind, I thought I would give you a quick rundown of the things that as an independent model, you can claim for as your expenses, because the investigation into my affairs took 2 parts. One, an investigation as to whether I had declared all my income honestly, which I had, and the second part of the investigation was to look into my expenses to see if I'd been honest about them. I thought I'd talk through the expenses because one of the things that made this investigation so stressful is that every model I've spoken to who's got an accountant has a different opinion on what we're allowed to claim for. So I spoke to many models during the 15 months I was being investigated, and I heard so many different versions of what you're allowed to claim for that I found it very stressful. For example, one model who had gone to HMRC herself and asked when she started her business had been told that she could claim for half of all of her cosmetics and half of all of her clothes, irrespective of what percentage of her clothes and what percentage of her cosmetics were used for modelling as opposed to life. Now, that sounds like a perfectly reasonable way of working it out, although it is probably a bit arbitrary, but that is not what I had done at all. And so when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, I've not kept any of my receipts for my personal life cosmetics or my personal life clothes because I didn't know I was going to need to prove how much I'd spent on them, and it made me very anxious indeed. I also heard from a model whose accountant won't let her claim for modelling clothes or cosmetics, which seems to me insane. But again, when I heard that, I thought maybe my accountant has been insanely generous in allowing me to claim these things. So now that my accounts have been cleared directly by HMRC, in this tax year, I figure that I have finally got some authority to speak on this subject. So I'm going to tell you all the things that I claim for. I use an app on my phone for all my income and for my expenses. So every time I buy something and every time I earn something, I put it in on my phone. And then HMRC asked for a printout of all the information from that app. So that's what they were going on. So I know they had a complete list of everything I earned and everything I spent money on. So this list is all stuff that they said was totally okay with them. So if you are an independent model or if you are in a related field and some of these categories seem to ring true to you, I hope this will reassure you that, yep, you can claim for them. So let's start. Allowable expenses for models. First of all, eating out. Any food that you eat when you are away from home, specifically working, you can claim for. Now, it doesn't matter where that food comes from. It can be food that you bought in a restaurant, it can be food that you bought in Simply Food by M&S at a service station, or, particularly excitingly, I think, it can be food you bought from your local supermarket specifically for a tour. Now, obviously, as I said last month, do not abuse this. If you go food shopping and you buy a couple of items for a tour, you can't just claim your whole food bill. But sometimes I go and do specific food shops just for touring food. And for example, in the back of my car, I always have a whole load of dehydrated noodles, dehydrated porridge, fizzy water, which is what I drink during the day, and a few other items like that. So all of those things you can claim for. Secondly, and this is a pretty obvious one that hopefully all of you are already claiming for, but travel, which obviously means flights, train tickets, parking, but also extends to tolls, data charges when you're abroad, and anything directly associated with having to leave your area or your country in order to model. Thirdly, clothing. All clothing bought specifically for modelling. Even if the clothes could be worn in real life, so a lot of us models have street clothes in our modelling wardrobe like jeans, business suits, things like that, that theoretically you could wear in real life, if you have bought them specifically to model in, then you can claim them, even if they look like normal clothes. Remember that you might have to show evidence that you've shot in them though, so ideally it's really great if a customer has specifically asked you for items, then that's great evidence that you needed the item. You need to have photographs of you working in those clothes. If you don't have any and you're never going to get any, then don't claim for the clothes in the first place. Cosmetics. Now, this was briefly the only sticking point in the entire investigation. HMRC questioned the amount of money I spent on cosmetics. Just to give you an idea, in the year that they investigated, I had spent £2,000 on cosmetics, which is pretty typical for me annually. And at the time, that represented about 3% of my turnover. In the end, they accepted it. So if your expenses are a similar percentage of your turnover for cosmetics, you're probably fine, but they did seem more suspicious of that particular claim than anything else. The main reason for this was that they asked if I had separate cosmetics for work. Now, theoretically, that would be a great way to do it if you had two separate cosmetics bags. That's what they asked me. Do you have two separate cosmetic bags? And the answer, as most women and models would know, is it doesn't make sense because cosmetics don't last indefinitely. So to have two bags of identical products but two of each item really isn't the sanest thing. For something like an eyebrow pencil that lasts for me a year, there's really no need to have two. So having not been able to say that I had two separate makeup bags, I was able to say that I pay for a proportion of my cosmetics from my personal funds. However, I didn't actually have evidence of that because I don't keep my receipts for personal purchases because I never thought that they'd be relevant. So actually, having had HMRC be a little suspicious of my cosmetics situation, I think I am going to start keeping personal receipts for cosmetics that I've bought for my personal and modelling use. So broadly speaking, if I buy cosmetics for work, I buy them via amazon.co.uk, and if I buy cosmetics to use primarily in real life, I buy them while I'm going around the supermarket. So in my own mind and for my own ethical satisfaction, there is a separation, but all those products end up in the same makeup bag, and sometimes they all get used for work and occasionally they all get used in my personal life. So I can see that of all the things that HMRC investigated, that was the one that I would have had the most trouble really unpicking. So I would suggest that you do something to prove that you have some separation, that you don't just put all of your personal and professional cosmetics through your books as professional. Cosmetic procedures are also deductible. I have heard some models say that they have only been allowed to claim 50% because, of course, if you have injections into your face, it's not like you can put your face away at the end of your working day and get out your old wrinkly face that hasn't had any injections in it. So I can see the point. As it happens, they have allowed me all my cosmetic procedures, but to be fair, I'm pretty sparing with what I have. I don't know what the situation would be if I'd had butt implants and boob implants, but actually the procedures I've had have been relatively minor. So possibly if you are someone who has extensive cosmetic procedures done on a regular basis, you might want to inquire further. Employees. I'm just going to read this out because I made my little list of what employees I hire. So I want to get it accurate. So if you hire other models, photographers, accountants, personal assistants, drivers, camera operators, editors, or people to do your work-related laundry, it's all tax deductible. For me, that's quite a large number each year, and it's increased over the last few years, and so it's totally worth claiming for, of course. Stationery, again, I hope this is a good old obvious one, but postage, packaging, computer equipment, anything related to your home office. One thing HMRC did ask me in my face-to-face interview with them was whether I had a separate office in my house. Fortunately for me, I was able to say, yes, I do, but really, I don't see why you should have to, because although I have a separate office in my house, I don't use it. When I do my admin, I don't go to my office. I often sit on my bed. So just so you are aware, It seems that HMRC are reassured by you having a separate area in your house for your admin tasks, though frankly, how many people really do, I don't know. Next category is one that does seem, again, a little controversial to them. I claim for my physio and massage appointments. In my face-to-face interview, they asked whether that was for a specific injury, which for me it is. But it is one of the things I've heard various models say that their accountants won't let them claim for. So having gone through this, my advice to you is that if you have an injury that your medical records would support, then you're probably fine getting treatment specifically for it. So I think you'd be on a much stickier wicket if you were going and having a general aromatherapy massage than if you were going to a physical therapist of some sort and having targeted sport massage for a problem. If your medical records don't reflect your injury, it might be worth getting your therapist to write a receipt that mentions what they were treating. I think from reading between the lines of my interview, HMRC were looking for some evidence that you really needed the treatment and it was for something that would impact on your work. Camera equipment, of course you can claim for, and of course sex toys. So I don't do the sort of work that requires sex toys, but I do have to buy a lot of bondage equipment. All of that, however embarrassing it might look on your accounts, is claimable, so go for it. They're expensive. Gifts and entertainment. This is a very nice one. If you take a client, a photographer or similar out for dinner, buy them a gift or anything similar to that, then it's tax deductible. Don't abuse this one. For example, my husband hires me, but if I take him out for dinner after a shooting day, I don't claim for that, because although we might be discussing work and it might be on a working day, it's dinner with my husband. However, if I take my husband and a client of ours out for dinner, then I would claim for that, because A, that's not going to be a romantic night, and B, it is part of the shoot as far as I'm concerned. If we're entertaining a client, we are probably talking about work and we are probably trying to strengthen that working relationship. It's not something we're doing just for fun. Advertising. Hopefully this is obvious, but any subscriptions to portfolio sites, website fees, anything like that, you can claim for. Anything that gets your face and your name out into the world that costs you money, you can claim for. Obviously business cards or anything like that fall into the same category. Then finally, mileage. The rules change for mileage on an annual basis, but for most people who use a car for work, they will have bought their car personally in their own name, and then they will charge a certain amount of business mileage. At the moment, I think it's 45 pence per mile for the first 10,000 miles, and then after that it's 25 pence a mile. Don't quote me on that, it's something like that. So it's just a sum that you can work out at the end of each tax year. Some people buy their vehicle through their company, but I can't really comment on that because that's not something I've done. But at the end of the year, when you claim your business miles, don't just claim all the miles your car has done, because I think being overambitious probably would look quite suspicious. So for example, I use my car almost entirely for work because my husband's car is more comfortable, so when we're doing social things, we tend to travel in his. But even so, at the end of each year, I normally claim about 13,000 business miles. But I drive about 15,000, so I leave 2,000 miles as a sort of buffer, as an assumption that because of course I will have done a trip to Tesco in my car a couple of times in the year, and of course I will have driven to see a friend several times as well, that I just feel as though putting every single mile through my business, it doesn't feel honest, and it also doesn't feel particularly easily defensible. So I personally would rather slightly underestimate how many of my miles were business than overestimate. One thing that HMRC asked me to do quite early on in my investigation is to write a complete list of all the places I had driven to over the year that they investigated. Fortunately, I was able to do that because it was a year I remembered and my records were relatively good, but I was very, very grateful not to have been overambitious, and I was very grateful that I hadn't tried to claim more business mileage than I could really justify. If I can tell you anything as a kind of broad principle as a result of this investigation I've been through, it's that when you have to look two tax inspectors in the eye and justify how you run your business, it's really nice to know that you erred on the side of caution and erred on the side of cheating yourself rather than cheating the government. I really recommend it. It was a nice feeling to be able to say that, oh, but of course I didn't claim for this because I just wasn't sure. It was nice to have a few examples of things that I probably could have got away with but didn't, because I think it showed good faith on my part and hopefully a degree of scrupulousness. Is scrupulousness a word? Scrupularity? Answers below. Thank you. And finally, any accountancy fees. If you pay for insurance of any kind, including against investigation, that is all deductible too. I know this video probably will not have been very entertaining and probably won't be watched by anyone except for internet models, but I really hope that's helpful to you, because I know I've been doing this for 16 years and I've never been really sure of whether my accounts would stand up to scrutiny, just because there's not much certainty about this sort of thing and every model seems to do it differently. So I do hope that this will have put your mind at ease and hopefully given you some ideas of things that you can claim for that maybe you weren't already claiming for. So thank you for watching. If you have any further questions, please comment below or email me, because I'm happy to help, especially with this subject. I don't want models to flounder around being scared like I have been at various points in my career, and having finally gone through this awful situation, at least we now have some answers. So if you want more answers, hit me up. Is that what the young people say? I believe it is. So thank you, as always. I will be back next month with probably something very much more trivial. In the meantime, have a lovely month and bye-bye. Bye.